Hi, friends. Pastor Terry here. We are Dalhousie Church, and this is the 10-Minute Coach. We're going to jump into the book of Hebrews here. It's intended to be a book of encouragement. It's intended to be a book that implores us to faithfulness in Christ. And yet, at times, it's a book that I think for some inspires concern or even fear because of the nature of some of the ways that the author implores us. I say the author because we really don't know who wrote the book. For years, it was thought that probably Paul wrote it, but more careful analysis suggests maybe that's not the case, that maybe it was actually Dr. Luke or maybe Apollos, who Paul references as a particularly refined speaker of the first century. The nature of the Greek invites us to suggest that like it's written in such a smooth and eloquent style of language that many find it difficult to believe that Paul wrote it. Maybe Paul wrote it through the hand of a second party. He often did that. Someone else was his scribe. Perhaps this scribe was particularly skilled. We just don't know. What we know is that there is a concern for apostasy in the church. We know that this was an issue, not just in the first century, but then on into the second century, when persecution became particularly severe. Around Alexandria in northern Africa, there were concerns because there were people who had recanted their faith, and then when the pressure came off, they came back to their faith in Jesus, and there were questions around whether they should be welcomed back into the church. It's a significant theological discussion in the pages of church history. For you and I, it's a really relevant discussion because we all know people who have seemingly been followers of Jesus and then were no longer followers of Jesus. Or maybe it's just not clear. They were with us, but now we're just really not sure where they are. The exhortation that we encounter here in Hebrews is to hold on, not just because. So, my son Daniel and I went river rafting once a few years ago, and it was a particularly high water. It was moving particularly fast. He's a phenomenal swimmer. He was certified as a lifeguard and as a coach. Me, not nearly so much. And it was one of those situations that once you're on the river, you just don't have any options. You hang on and you paddle like crazy and you keep going. And it was actually a blast. It was a lot of fun. When we talk about holding on, I think sometimes we imagine that like, oh my goodness, grin and bear it. Like, there's no getting out of this now. I'm hooped. But the writer of Hebrews really calls us to hold on to Jesus and begins by describing in just elevated, superlative, gorgeous language of how beautiful and amazing Jesus is. And there's nothing that compares to him. And so it's not hold on because you have no better option. It's hold on because like this is pure gold. He is worthy of hanging on to. And everything else pales in comparison. That's really the argument that we find at the book of Hebrews. And I've invited you to reflect on some of the challenges that we find as we work through the text, because there are times when he talks very bluntly or frankly about the renovation of faith that maybe many in our culture are experiencing. They're rethinking things, and I think that at the heart of the question is, well, what are you going to do with Jesus? There's lots of things. A church can look differently. How we live out our faith, how we evangelize and share faith with others, how we perceive those who have come from other faiths but have high moral ideals and live exemplary lives, and maybe even speak about matters of faith in ways that are familiar to us as followers of Jesus. There's lots of room for discussion in those, and how we're supposed to understand this, and how would we share the hope that we have in Jesus with those who I would suggest are spiritually enlivened and may or may not be able to identify Jesus as the one who really is the longing of their heart. Many of you know that I'm a huge C.S. Lewis fan. Among his many writings, honestly, my favorite are his children's stories. And I say children's, and you got to put it in brackets because the Chronicles of Narnia, for instance, are really as much for adults as anyone else. In the final book of the 7-book series, that is the Chronicles of Narnia, The Last Battle, in the second last chapter of the book, the children have gone through the door in the shed. It seems like they're going to be executed there, but lo and behold, they find themselves that they're in Aslan's country. And there's this extraordinary exchange that takes place because there's been this Tarkan who really had high ideals, who makes his way into the shed, kind of to see what's really going on. Well, they encounter him in Aslan's country, and very controversially, Lewis argued that Aslan, or he presents that Aslan met with this Tarkan, and effectively says that while you were misguided, everything that you gave to Tash, the demon god, was, because of the purity of it, because of the intent of it, was really received by me. And only anyone who does something vile in my name is really serving Tash. And there's something that really rings true for us here. Not that there are any other ways to be redeemed than Jesus. He alone can save. There is no name under heaven by which we may be saved but the name of Jesus. But in the unknowing that is around, is it possible that God is at work in extraordinary ways? I would take you back and remind you of texts that we looked at early in this series. When we were in the Joshua sermon, we considered the fact that there are multiple places in the Old Testament where God shows up in the lives of people where he's not supposed to be in that narrative. At least that's how I grew up thinking about it. Like the children of Israel is where God shows up. And yet then he shows up, certainly Abraham, that's pre-Israel, but he shows up in people like Balaam, when he's supposed to, Balaam, this prophet, we don't know where he really comes from, but God speaks to him, and he's supposed to curse the children of Israel, but he can't. And he's in this conversation with God. I'm fascinated to find out when I get to heaven what the next part of that story was. What happened in his life? Where did he go from there? He had this encounter with God. He could only bless the children of Israel. It meant he didn't get any of the financial gain that had been promised to him. But here's God showing up in the life of this guy who's certainly not part of the Israelites' narrative, but God's at work. God's been at work even among the people who are going to be conquered and kicked out of the land. Rahab, the prostitute, confesses faith in Yahweh, and she and her family are spared. Ruth, the Moabitess, joins Naomi in returning to Bethlehem, and she becomes part of the line of King David, as does Rahab. We have all of these remarkable stories. There's actually a significant list of people who are part of. It's evident that God is at work in their lives, even though they're not part of the Jewish community. Now, Jesus alone is the way to be saved, and this stirring, this spiritual stirring, I would suggest, I would understand it. It's drawing us to Jesus. It's calling us in that direction, and that's part of what the writer of Hebrews is exhorting us to, is that he is superlative. Like there is no one but him. And so we get to chapter 12, and I've invited you to read that text together kind of slowly, verses 1 and following. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely. That scholars tell us that that's a bit of a picture of a first century racer, Olympiad, stripping off, running basically naked, so there's nothing that would encumber them. They didn't have Lululemon back in those days. The sin that so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross. That joy that was set before him was you, by the way. That was what he was anticipating. Why did he go to the cross? What was on his mind? You were. That was why he endured the pain and the suffering, the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. You can go back to chapter 1 and look at the parallels and the comparisons there. I'm out of time here, but I'm hoping that this is going to inspire you to take encouragement. as you read through this text, even as you look at some of the things that can be distressing, like chapter 6, where like, man, bless you. May you experience Jesus. May you be encouraged to persevere in your faith. Pray for those around you who maybe are struggling in their faith, maybe have lost their way. And that in a world where lots seem to be deconstructing faith in some way, shape, or form, that what would result would be a far superior expression of the Christian faith in their life, of confidence in Jesus in their life. And then as we get to these last couple of chapters of the book of Hebrews, the eternal hope that we all have because we are looking forward to what Jesus has for us throughout all of eternity, and we long that we would experience all of that together. Bless you. I'm Pastor Terry Lee. We are Dalhousie Church, and this has been the 10-Minute Coach. Bye for now.